Welcome to the Infrastructure Podcast. My name is Anthony Oliver, and today we're talking about bioenergy and specifically looking at how carbon capture and storage is set to transform the technology. Now, UK's net zero energy transition is firmly underway, and one of the most promising new technologies is bioenergy with carbon capture and storage, or BECCS. By combining the generation of renewable power and the permanent removal of CO2, BECCS has been described as a double win for climate action. Now, at the heart of this opportunity is Evero, the low-carbon energy-from-wastewood company. Evero has been selected by the UK government to transform its Ince Biomass Plant into the nation's first large-scale BECCS facility. Branded InBECCS, the project aims to capture 217,000 tonnes of CO2 annually, generate clean electricity for more than 100,000 homes, and create skilled green jobs. All, of course, at the same time diverting waste wood from landfill. It's a great opportunity, and I'm joined today by Alex Young, Head of Development at Evero, an engineer turned developer with more than 2 decades in renewables. And together we will dive into the promise, the pitfalls, and the future of BECCS in the UK. So how will it be delivered, and what does InBECCS mean for Britain's leadership in carbon removal and industrial carbonisation? Well, let's find out. Alex, welcome to the Infrastructure Podcast.
Good morning, Anthony. Really pleased to join you this morning.
Well, myself too, because I'm really interested in this new technology, but let's get straight into it. I gave a short bit of background, but for those unfamiliar, tell us what exactly is BECCS and why is it seen as so critical to achieving the UK's net zero ambitions? As
you remarked in your intro, it's bioenergy with carbon capture and storage. And in our context, we're taking biogenic CO2 from the waste wood that comes to our plants, we capture it, and then we store it permanently. Without capture, bioenergy is carbon neutral, so that means our emissions go back into the atmosphere and are absorbed by those trees that where the wood came from. And with the capture and storage, it becomes geological storage, permanent, creating carbon negativity. And this will help the UK meet strategy carbon budgets while generating power.
So the wood you're burning there, just to be clear, it's waste wood as opposed to wood that's specifically grown as a biofuel. Or do you do both?
No, we are very focused on what we call post-consumer wood. So this is wood that's had a life as a kitchen or part of your furniture, no longer needed by yourself. So you take it down to the tip, and it eventually ends up in one of our plants.
I did just that only very recently with an old shed, so maybe it'll end up in your plant, who knows. You're using...
Sheds are in the mix too.
Well, you're using Mitsubishi Heavy Industries' proven carbon capture technology. So what is that? And how does BECCS compare perhaps with other carbon removal technologies in terms of cost, scalability and performance?
Absolutely. So Mitsubishi Heavy Industries, or MHI, is a leading industrial group operating in many key segments, such as energy, logistics, and infrastructure. Their carbon capture technology is what's called a post-combustion chemical absorption solution, which is proven to capture the CO2 from combustion gases, and is commercially deployed worldwide. BECCS combines reliable grid power with durable removals, and we're measuring them, monitoring and reporting them to very strict standards. You might hear of things called MRV standards, monitoring, reporting, and verification. Cost-wise, high quality, high integrity carbons. They sell at a premium in the voluntary carbon market, or VCM, but that's because of their high quality, high integrity status. And they're helping lower subsidies versus other CCS applications. And we'll go on to that in a little bit more detail later on. So basically we are retrofitting it, so installing it on existing bioenergy assets like our own. And the permanence comes from storing in geological stores.
So when you remove the CO2, you capture it as a gas, and you say you pump it into geological stores, which are local, are they, or do you to transport it?
They are very local to us. In fact, the above-ground installation, or the injection point, is next door to our site, quite literally on the other side of the fence. And we'll talk a bit more about the high-net infrastructure. This is the pipes and stores that others are building for us to connect to.
Okay, well, where would you say BECCS sits, therefore, in the UK's overall decarbonisation strategy? Is it kind of an outlier? Is it central to it? Where does it sit?
Well, the government and the Climate Change Committee, they see it as essential. We have 2030 and 2035 greenhouse gas removals, or GGRs, targets. And the business model that the government is bringing forward, known as a contract for difference, is helping advance that. And our BECCS project is very near term. We're wanting to be up and running by 2030, and it's really scalable. You can apply this to other similar assets connected to the infrastructure and have the removals.
Yeah. So, and when you talk about permanence, that's because once you put that CO2 back in the ground, it literally stays there.
That is correct. It's geologically secure.
Well, let's talk about the InBECCS project, because you've been burning wastewood in the Ince plant for quite some time. But walk us through the transformation. I mean, I always think of carbon capture and storage as something like a bit of witchcraft, Alex, to be honest. But convince me that it's actually an engineering process. I mean, walk us through the transformation. What do? Do you literally bolt something on the back of the chimney?
I think that's the easiest way to describe it. But basically, we're retrofitting.
It must be more complicated than that, Alex.
No, but we've got to make it simple for people.
Okay.
Of course, there's some engineering involved, and as an engineer, I'm deeply fascinated by this, because engineering and those solutions are really important to achieving our net zero ambitions. So far, we have completed some feasibility studies, so we've tested, is this feasible? We've done some engineering studies. You might have heard of a word called front-end engineering design, or FEED. So we've done some pre-FEED work, gearing up to start FEED. FEED is also sometimes known as front-end loading. So you're doing some of the engineering upfront to be sure about when you connect this thing, it's going to perform as you expect. And since being selected as a priority project, following what's called the project negotiation list selection, or P&L, we are continuing to advance other work streams. This includes getting permission from the local authority, advancing our discussions with buyers who want to buy our carbon removals. We've got ongoing engagement with the government around this subsidy contract called a GGR contract. And we're focusing all of our teams on this so that we do it well. Because what we want is certainty. And by putting time and effort into this engineering, we build certainty. And we're hoping to make much more progress this year now that we are a priority project.
Right. And is it all about subsidies, though? I mean, the business model presumably it adds costs to your existing operation. Will it ever be something which you can do without being subsidised?
That is our plan. We want to use those subsidies to kickstart an economy, and longer term, we want to create frameworks that do not require subsidies in the long term. So at the moment, our revenue stack, so this is the money we earn from running the plant, will be subsidized or be supported by carbon removal revenues. So this is the money that corporate off-takers will pay us for those carbon removals. And it's all going to be underpinned by a contract for difference from the government, which provides what we call revenue stability. And it's that revenue stability, so call it confidence, that gives the confidence for investors to invest. And that path, we've managed to reduce the need for public support. And that improves our what we call bankability, or the attractiveness of the project. We don't like to talk about specific pricing that we've achieved in the market or what returns we are likely to achieve. But the important feature of our project is the net subsidy requirement that we have once we factor in those revenues from a corporate buyer. And they are after those high quality, high integrity removals as part of their own journey for decarbonisation. These could be hard to abate sectors where they've done everything they can, right, but they want to do more.
And the main technological challenges in retrofitting a carbon capture to a wastewood facility, is it, I mean, obviously making it stack up financially is one challenge, but the technical challenges are what? Simply making the kit fit.
Well, and a big focus is going to be on engineering and defining what we call the interfaces. So how do we plug it into the existing facility, and how's it going to get built? Because remember, the existing asset needs to continue doing its job, taking wastewood from the market and making electricity at the same time.
Yeah.
So we need to keep receiving that wastewood at our facility whilst building something on the side. So we would be developing, let's call it the construction sequence during this front-end engineering phase. and we will be working out how to commission it without disrupting the existing facility. It's really, really important that we continue doing what we are doing.
And using Mitsubishi's technology presumably means you don't have to worry about all of it. You just have to worry about integrating it with what you're already doing there.
Absolutely. We've selected a proven technology with a very strong list of commercial references, which put simply is track record.
Yeah.
And that provides assurance to us and other stakeholders, like government, like off-takers, like investors, that it's going to do what it says on the tin.
Yeah. And what about the jobs and skills that you're going to bring into the area? Where does that come in? Is it all about during the construction, or will it require a whole load of new skills and new jobs when it's up and running?
Well, you know me, I'm an engineer. I'm very keen to stimulate opportunities for science and engineering. And InBECCS is a very important emitter project that's going to be connecting to this high-net infrastructure. But we're not the only one. There are five projects on the priority list. And HyNet brings a combination of engineering, construction across all disciplines, electrical, civil, mechanical, and longer-term operation and maintenance opportunities across the infrastructure, not only our facility, but HyNet too. This industrial clustering means there's going to be knowledge and experience developed in the Northwest, which can be replicated elsewhere in the UK and maybe in the longer term exported to other places wanting to do the same. As we replicate this across our assets, there's a really good national skills story here about anchoring what we're doing here in the Northwest and taking that elsewhere.
Yeah.
So yes, we think it brings lots of opportunity.
Okay, we'll talk a bit more about HyNet and that whole cluster in a moment. But let's talk a bit about you, just to set the context for how you fit into it, Alex. You grew up in South Africa. You're an engineer by training, and you've been in renewables since 1999, starting with hydropower, with engineering consultancy Mott MacDonald. So what drew you into this whole low carbon capture world?
I'm an engineer, and engineers like solving problems. And engineering is a fantastic career if you like solving problems. I love infrastructure projects and was drawn into the energy sector really early in my career looking at renewables, as we've said. And I've been in the sector for over 25 years. And I have to say, carbon removals feels a bit like renewables did 25 years ago. And just look at the scale of renewable deployment now. And we need all of the tools to tackle climate change. Carbon removals and negative emissions are really needed to get us to net zero. Some of those industries are really hard to abate, and having a carbon removal in the toolkit really, really helpful.
I mean, I agree, and I suppose I described it as being something of a witchcraft. But the reason I say that is because, there was a feeling that if you had a problem and you couldn't resolve it, then just say, well, we'll deal with carbon capture. It's gone beyond that now, is it? Carbon capture is a reality. It's something which actually works. It's actually a doable technology. It
is, and removing gases from flue streams is something the industry has done for decades. So this is nothing new, and it needs to play its part. But there's been a lot of promise, and now the industry needs to deliver.
Yeah. Well, you've been at Evero for just over 8 years, and a phrase that I'd noted in your bio, you describe yourself as an originator at heart. What do you mean by that, and how has that shaped your career?
Origination is about creating something new. And for me, a new solution to solve a problem, and at the heart of it is commercial discipline. As an engineer, that means applying technology to the opportunity. My early love of maths, specifically applied maths, and the sciences were a constant in my choices. As a young adult, figuring out where I wanted to go and what I wanted to do. And the energy is such an important part of society. I felt like I've made my contribution.
Yeah. Well, you've got over 25 years of experience in energy and infrastructure, leading groundbreaking projects in waste to energy, carbon capture and low carbon fuels like green methanol and sustainable aviation fuel. I mean, Alex, are we getting there? Is renewable energy ever really going to be the norm?
Well, in my career, I have seen renewables become a utility scale solution with significant cost reductions from increased deployment that was stimulated by government subsidies. So yes, with the government's aim to be a clean energy superpower, I expect us to continue to move towards this objective. Trick is deploying things at pace with the right market signals, and importantly, ensuring that these projects are, let's call it, investable.
Yeah.
We want to deploy money where it makes sense.
Well, making things investable, I suppose that comes down to getting those government policies nailed so that projects like that do actually they're able to make it to financial investment decision, etc. So that seems to be happening. Yeah,
absolutely.
Meanwhile, of course, outside of your work in carbon reduction, you're a sailor and a passionate water sportser. Started with windsurfing, you say, as a teenager in South Africa, but now progressed to big yachts. Where? On what boats? Are you a racer or a cruiser?
Yeah, well, I grew up near Cape Town, which really provided a fantastic playground for being outdoors, particularly spending time in the sea. Windsurfing was my initial passion, and it taught me a lot about how to get the wind to get where I wanted to go, and fast. I got my skipper's qualification a couple of years ago, converting those natural skills to go fast into a formal qualification. There's quite a lot of maths involved, actually, with skip navigation, and it's fantastic. Taught me to navigate where I needed to go, taking account of tides and wind. I say, if I live closer to the sea, I'd love to join a racing team, because that combines teamwork with strategy, tactics, competing against others, harnessing wind and tide to deliver results. To me, that means getting around the course quickly, of course, and importantly, getting over the finish line safely. I like completion. And in a team, there's always roles, and good communication means we get there and we get it done together.
Well, you're very welcome to come and float around the Solent with me if you like. I know exactly what you mean about that. The challenge of planning a passage. I did such a little route around the Isle of Wight the other day, and it's quite interesting. You've got to plan where you need to be at what time, what the tide's going to do, and how it's going to help you and how it's going to hinder you. Because if you're battling against the tide, it's a terrible position to be in. So, and I suppose, and that could be an analogy for anything, I suppose. But no, interesting, yeah.
You can't control the tide and the wind, but you can control, I would say, your team on the boat. So it's about taking those external factors, figuring out how they're going to influence your journey, and then working together as a group to get from A to B.
Yeah. Well, in my case, the group was me and the dog, but her not having opposable thumbs made it quite hard for her to contribute, but she was there in spirit. Anyway, you say that sailing, there is a team set mindset in there. Are you bringing that into the work you're doing at InBECCS?
Absolutely. I'm a strong believer that people make projects happen. A strong team, clear responsibilities, aligned goals, you can achieve anything. High-performing teams, which I extend beyond the Evero team, I might add, include other project partners like MHI. And all of those teams have trusted their foundation with commitment and accountability as other key ingredients. Clear roles, responsibilities, and strong communications under pressure, really important ingredients for successful high-performing teams.
Yeah. Well, I do welcome you down to assist me. I single-handed on a boat with a spinnaker is always a challenge, so a bit of teamwork there would be very helpful. If you're up for it. Anyway, back to BECCS.
I love sailing on the Solent. Absolutely amazing. There is so many things you can hit, and you can also have a lot of fun.
Yeah. Well, yes. Having half a metre below your keel is always a good thing.
Yes, agreed.
Anyway, back to BECCS. You mentioned HyNet. How does it fit in, though? What are the synergies that exist between, for instance, bioenergy, carbon capture, and hydrogen? And why is that such an important cluster?
Well, HyNet provides shared carbon or CO2 transport and storage infrastructure, as well as hydrogen infrastructure. And it's clusters like HyNet that create the opportunity for economies of scale to be driven across power, industry, and hydrogen. And it's those industries that are going to accelerate decarbonisation. As we've said, InBECCS is one of 5 emitter projects in the cluster, with others connecting to the HyNet infrastructure. There's a range of other decarbonisation projects that are all going to play their part over time. As I mentioned, there is the CO2 infrastructure, but there's also hydrogen infrastructure coming too. And each of those things will play their part in decarbonising industries in the Northwest. I was recently with United Utilities, and they are working with other emitter projects facilitated by the HyNet Alliance to get organised to provide the services to those projects, just as an example.
Because beyond storage, presumably maybe not now, but presumably in the future, there will be a market for that captured CO2 as an industrial gas, as a product which can actually be, it's got a value surely that you can then sell.
Absolutely. There is a market for CO2 currently. It's used in a few niche industrial uses. Of course, our priority is this permanent storage to create high quality, high integrity removals. But over time, our biogenic CO2 might be encouraged in the production of synthetic hydrocarbons, which at the end are going to displace fossil hydrocarbons as a fuel or as a chemical feedstock. So it won't end with storing the CO2.
Yeah, and do you think clusters like HyNet, which of course it exists because its geographical location is such that there are an awful lot of industries that are brought together there, but can clusters like that be replicable around the UK as a model for industrial decarbonisation?
Absolutely, and the UK had 5 clusters in mind because clusters align infrastructure, policy, and capital. And once you get one cluster done and dusted, you deploy it on the next. And we are fundamentally ready to play our part so that the cluster in the northwest is successful and is seen as a success by others.
I mean, do you think the UK is ready to take on this kind of voluntary carbon market, to absorb high quality removals from projects like BECCS?
We are getting ready. Demand exists at the moment from leading corporates who are active in this space, and those early offtake deals really help set quality and price signals. And the contracts that we are going to be negotiating with government, those GGRs, will interact with those corporate offtakes in the voluntary carbon market.
Yeah.
And by deploying, we will continue to reduce costs and, importantly, reduce deployment timelines. So the market is predicted to grow with high quality, high integrity BECCS projects playing a really strong part.
Yeah, because it fundamentally, Alex, it's an energy generation project as well as an experimental or a pathfinding carbon capture project.
Absolutely. We actually do 3 things. We take that waste wood that I mentioned at the beginning. So we're an outlet for waste wood. And taking that waste wood, we make clean power. And the third thing we're going to do is deliver carbon removals. So we get 3 things from that waste wood. And it's really compelling. And we think it's compelling. And the government thinks so too, having selected us as a priority project now.
Yeah. Well, interesting you say about government policy, because we are now hearing yet more moves towards accelerating the nuclear sector. We've got, we heard a couple of months ago the support for the Sizewell C project, as a low carbon energy generation technology. In your position, I imagine you say great, but I suppose government policy being clear and supportive is critical. I mean, is it sufficient for to scale BECCS across the UK? Is the current political move away from net zero technologies by Conservative and Reform and some parts of the left, to be quite honest, is that a worry to you in terms of aligning that critical government policy?
Listen, as a developer, we want certainty. That's the thing that we are striving for, because that allows us to continue to advance our efforts, knowing that frameworks are there so that we can attract other project partners to play their part. As I mentioned earlier, it's a team effort. Government has a job to play as well. So it's really important that we have continuity and timely decision making so that we can hit our project deadlines. We've got an important deadline with our off-taker, and we've got deadlines to face around getting planning sorted out and getting to an investment decision that will allow us to get to the next step and build this thing. We talked about those challenges around the difficult bits. Yeah, it's the construction sequencing. And we want to give those jobs to people so they can figure out how to do these really tricky things and then take that elsewhere.
So what you're saying is that discussions around whether net zero is the right path are not necessarily helpful. Do you think that the UK needs a dedicated revenue mechanism to subsidise projects such as emissions reduction schemes? Perhaps like the US's Inflation Reduction Act. I mean, that provided a really strong draw for investment.
Well, the UK has chosen a contract for difference as a structure for stimulating investment, and it's been very successful in the offshore wind sector. It's driven a whole bunch of deployment and it's brought down costs. So that's the right tool for us because it gives that revenue certainty to the project and therefore to the investors. And it's pairing, so it's working together with off-takers in that voluntary carbon market, drawing in private money, supporting the public money. But at the end of the day, we want that market, the voluntary carbon market, to be strong and mature so that we don't need government anymore. Yeah.
I mean, how do you see, therefore, InBECCS, I suppose, competing or complementing other renewable energy sources in the market? Are you head-to-head with the nuclear industry when it comes to resources, skills, or are you trying to work with them?
We need everything. All of those solutions are needed to tackle climate change, and they all have their part to play. And they're all needed to achieve clean power by 2030 and beyond.
Yeah.
Keep going.
Yeah. I mean, the Ince project is a wastewood site. I imagine that there's a limit to the number of sheds that you can find to burn. Is that correct? I'm just wondering whether the Ince project, to what extent could it be a blueprint for scaling BECCS? Is across other wastewood sites? Is there a limit to the amount of feedstock you've got there? I
mean, the feedstock has been constant over the last 15, 20 years. So, and there's no signal that it's going down. The really important thing is that it's local and it's regional to our facility. So we're not bringing it in from afar. And we can replicate across our assets, and our assets are needed to continue to provide an outlet for this material that continues to arise.
Yeah, because obviously I'm using personal experience about sheds, but there presumably are other sources of wastewood beyond garden sheds.
The one that's easy for people to visualize is when you replace your kitchen, where does it go? And people do like to replace their kitchens, and wood is a very, very good building product. But it has a finite life in a house.
Okay, well, just to wrap us up, I mean, how significant, Alex, do you think BECCS could be in the energy mix by 2035 or 2050? I talked about it at the top being this transformational technology. Is that how you see it?
Yeah, I think the tons per annum of GGRs that the government needs runs into the millions of tons per annum. And so, yes, we will play our part absolutely in delivering on those ambitious targets that government have set in 2030 and beyond. And we want to get to zero by 2050, and we will not be able to abate everything. So we need some negative removals. Yeah. Absolutely.
And when will you be up and running, by the way?
We have a plan to be ready and running by the end of 2030, before 2030, beg your pardon.
Okay. So do you think the work that you're doing there is likely to become a global export opportunity for UK expertise and technology?
Absolutely. And we think we want the Northwest and the UK to be the shining light of how this is done.
Yeah.
There's projects, there's services around monitoring and reporting, there's finance, operation and maintenance, supply chain opportunities. There's loads of opportunity for people.
Yeah. Well, Alex, it is a really interesting opportunity, but the reality is that it's actually happening. You are doing it there. If people wanted to have a look at what you're up to, how do they get hold of you?
Our website gives lots of good information about what we're doing. So find us there. We have contact details, and we're always pleased to engage with people who want to learn more. We promote a lot of information through the social media because we think, as I say, people make projects happen, and the more people know about what we're doing and they can play their part, the better.
Well, some really great innovations there, and thanks so much for sharing the BECCS or the InBECCS project with us. All vital to the UK's net zero journey. So thanks so much for joining me today on the podcast. I look forward to maybe we can continue the conversation floating down the solar at some point. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you, Anthony. Much appreciated.
Great stuff. Thanks, Alex. That's all we've got time for today, unfortunately, but we have got more in the pipeline on the Infrastructure Podcast and more guests to talk to as we continue to probe some of the big issues that face the sector right now. If you haven't done so already, do check out the Infrastructure Podcast website, www.infrastructure-podcast.com, where you'll find background information and all the latest podcasts to listen to and to share. So thanks for joining us. Thanks again to Alex, and I look forward to seeing you again very soon.